All right, so since there's so few of us, anybody here do work with mobile or IoT? The rest of you guys just do straight up development for like web apps and such? Okay, you may be bored out of your mind, but I'll do my best. So the perimeter has been shattered is a cool name for a title. Well, I guess I should say, I'm Georgia. I do mobile and IoT. I assure you, you're all better developers than me. I do development, but probably not very well. And yet I teach a course on attacking applications, but when it comes to defending them, don't ask me. So yeah, we're gonna talk about destroying mobility and the Internet of Things and what we can do to fix some of these problems because they're disasters. So, maybe you'll learn something new, who knows. Overview slides are stupid, so that's just there to appease the people who want them. That's what we're gonna talk about, life. So many of you may have seen a diagram kind of like this, the fact that all the boxes are blue. I would guess we stole it from Cisco. My ex-CEO actually came up with this slide, so I assume he stole it from Cisco. Cisco, please forgive me, it wasn't my fault. But the blue boxes generally are Cisco. But this is kind of the idea, if you're the IT team or the security team or in a smaller company, you're probably both, let's be honest. You kind of think of your networks this way. Obviously, because this is a slide, it is two-dimensional and flat, but just in general, we think of it as two-dimensional and flat anyway, that the idea being, well, we have all these systems, but we as IT and security, we control them. We know what they are, but let's be honest, that's not true either, even with these traditional devices. On my penetration tests, where I break into companies and tell them how to fix their stuff, more often than not, there's some stuff like in the basement somewhere in a closet that people totally forgot about and is no longer part of their patch management system, and that's a great way to get in. But let's assume for the sake of argument, we know what all our boxes are, we have complete control of them because they're owned by our organization. So we have domain admin, we have local admin, we can update them, we can enforce password policies, anything that needs to be done, we can control it. And we've got all the networking equipment. Again, we've changed the passwords from Cisco, and we have a nice good password, and we can see all of the traffic coming in and out of our organization. If there's malware, social engineering attack, somebody clicks on it, calls back to a nasty gram in the cloud, we know about it because we are, at the perimeter. Hence, the perimeter has been shattered. This is our traditional way of doing security. But, this is kind of more up to date because over here, in the little corner, it has internet and secure mobility. That's kind of a misnomer in and of itself. But, our actual networks today are nothing like this. They are actually a lot more like this. We've moved more and more stuff to the cloud, which is really just the internet, right? So we have so much more software as a service. We have, we're all putting our email and we have Google apps or Microsoft apps or what have you to do our files in the cloud, or we might have Dropbox, or, I'm completely vendor agnostic, so I'm making these words up as I go along. But we have a lot of stuff out in the cloud. Those are just boxes that are internet facing. And we as the security team or the IT team or both have no control over the state of security of those boxes. They may not be patching. They may have crappy passwords. They may fall for social engineering attacks. They have our corporate data. They more than likely have our corporate logins that our users are also using for their local accounts. Let's be honest, people don't do password security well, and we have no control over their security. It's certainly a lot different than, a box that's literally on our network that we own. People are moving around more than ever. They're in coffee shops, they're in hotels, they're at conferences. I guess you guys' network being a developer conference is probably not as bad as the traditional conference I go to, where it's a hacking conference where there are straight up attacks all over the Wi-Fi network. It's really scary, and your employees are going to these conferences or going to these coffee shops or going to these countries that we know actively attack people, like say China or Russia, or actually the United States does it too, but as an American I'm not really supposed to say that. But anyway, they're taking their devices that they probably use for work and have work data on there to these places, using them, connecting to the Wi-Fi, in the case of the mobile device, connecting to the cell towers, and then bringing them back home and continuing to use them at work. Cars are kind of fun. You know, cars today are basically a computer on wheels. Train is a computer on more wheels. Plane is a computer on wings. So, you know, we've got some possibilities there. Certainly the easiest is, you know, people like sync their phone to the rental car and then don't unsync it. So the next person there gets, at the very least, you know, maybe their calendar and, you know, the user database or contact list of everybody in the organization. A great starting point for social engineering. But the main point among all of this is, you know, we don't really control the security of any of this. You know, we don't control the security of those boxes in the cloud. They're somebody else's problem. When people are bringing their own devices to work, you know, we'll talk about how we've kind of tried to control the security of them. But in general, it's up to the user to update the system, use a good password, don't click on links, things like that, and yet they're on our network. So it's made a problem that we never fixed in the first place, because let's be honest, people get popped. We saw, you know, Equifax, Apache Struts, just a, you know, library for web server, traditional device, no patching, lead to disaster. So certainly, you know, it hasn't worked out so well for us in security in the first place, but now we've just made it a lot harder as we control a lot less, and the network changes a lot more often. People drop their phones in the toilet, for instance. So the threat model about mobility and IoT is a lot of the same, except, you know, more, you know, traditionally when we think of vulnerabilities, we think of remote code execution, which is like no hands. The user doesn't have to do anything. There's something listening on the network, like an open port, you know, 445 for SMB that has vulnerabilities. The attackers send it on their way and get control of the system. Or we have client-side attacks where the users do have to surf to some sort of nasty website or open a nasty PDF or otherwise, you know, make themselves, you know, in the wrong place at the wrong time and get attacked. Or, you know, we have local privilege escalation. Somebody downloads some nasty malware. My mother, for instance, who has a PhD in computer science, this is not a my mother or my parents do not know how to use computers story. In fact, my mother knows how to use computers very well. But she also likes to play like games that she downloads from the internet. And they tend to have, on occasion, a little extra along with the game, like malware to steal her stuff. You know, you turn on antivirus and her machine and it just like lights up. It's like, oh dear, mother. So, you know, we have that on our traditional devices, and certainly we have social engineering, right? People getting phished via email, it's a big problem. But I always say, you know, if one of those like African princes is actually telling the truth, I could retire. So I answer all of them. Not really. But it's kind of the same thing with mobile. You know, we have remote attacks. Certainly things like the mobile carrier, the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, near field communication, any way these guys talk is a way that there could potentially be remote code execution. You know, we've seen in the past, like with the mobile carriers, the mobile modem in the phone often isn't even doing like basic security, like anti-exploitation. Like if you have any background in this, you've probably heard of like address space layout randomization to make it harder to point to things in memory, and data execution prevention to like not let you execute off the stack, which is just supposed to be junk, not code, but is used by attackers. Like this is like basic like Windows XP time of preventing attacks. You'll often find with some of these like chips, you know, they're just like, well, nobody's attacking that way, so why bother? So actually, you know, if you set up a malicious cell tower and start attacking mobile modems or Bluetooth things looking for vulnerabilities, there has been a lot of success with that. You know, people publish their research on the internet if you're interested. So remote code vulnerabilities are still alive and well. Same sort of thing with client sides. You know, we have people, you know, opening malicious PDFs on mobile, opening malicious web applications. You know, Apple's always like, you know, we have mandatory code signing. You cannot run malicious code that we haven't signed by Apple on your device. Well, the one like caveat to that is actually the Safari browser because it has to be able to render web pages, and Apple can't just like go sign them all. So the Safari application actually can run unsigned code. So if there's any vulnerability in the browser or any of the plugins like WebKit, that's a good way to get it on the device. Traditionally, people downloading stuff, what was the slogan? There's an app for that. I mean, certainly people have always been downloading things to their traditional devices. My mother likes games, I like security software, but we are downloading more and more apps to our phones. The fact that it's small, it's a little bit, certainly someone could come in and steal your laptop, but leaving this lying around, I think I've done it about twice on this trip, and people getting access to it, and certainly phishing is alive and well. They do have email clients. We'll talk a little bit later on about all the additional ways of phishing, but the overarching is any way you can deliver a link to someone that they can click on and have it open is a way that you can phish someone. And if people only know about email phishing, that's all they're getting in their security awareness training, that's all they're getting in their phishing simulations at work, then trying something else might be more successful. So probably the most controversial thing I've ever said, the reason that mobility is such a train wreck in terms of security is they built it too securely, which makes no sense, right? Building things securely makes things more secure, right? And indeed, today, certainly, the earliest phones, Android was a joke, and even iOS, on the iPhone, the first one, it ran its mobile browser as root, so, that's never a good idea in security. But, these days, both Android and iOS are major players, are doing security very well. All the way from the hardware, root of trust, all the way to the application layer, they are doing a very good job of security. The problem this created, and to an extent continues to create, is that we have been doing security in terms of, let's take, for example, antivirus. Everybody rags on antivirus, right? Everybody says it's no good, it's a joke. But antivirus on a traditional machine does a very good job of one specific thing, finding the kinds of known non-sophisticated viruses that my mother downloads with her online games. Does it find zero-day attacks? Absolutely not. Does it find really sophisticated, obfuscated payloads, nation-state type things, or even somebody in their mom's basement who did a bit of reading on Google? Absolutely not. But in terms of the easy stuff, it does a pretty good job and has for a long time. But if we, as they did, pretty much everybody who was in the antivirus business, when mobile started coming in mass, they put the word mobile in front of their product name and were able to get another license off of each user. And so in this sort of scenario, just taking the application sandbox, just looking at the application layer, so each app would be in its own particular sandbox. You can't see the data of another app. You can't see what's going on there. So an antivirus application, it pops up, it scans for viruses. It can't really tell if any of the other apps are viruses because it can't even look at what's going on in there. Say I download an app and then I download a really blatant this literally has the name of stage fright in it type application that has an exploit in it. My antivirus app can't see it. It cannot see that part of the file system. So it's, aside from checking whether itself is a virus, it's pretty useless. Things have gotten better on this front. There are still antiviruses that just do that. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, we have moved forward a bit with that. The devices have opened APIs for mobile device management and security that have given us a little more insight into what's going on. But in general, we tried to retrofit old security onto these new devices, and we just built them a little too securely for them to be effective. And it's really slowed us down in terms of what we're able to do in terms of device security. And I mentioned this a little bit before, mobile input-output and IoT input-output for that matter, but mobile especially, is a disaster of different ways to communicate. We've got the mobile modem. I mentioned a lot of these chips, they don't do a lot of security in a lot of cases. If you're interested, absolutely just Google it. Bluetooth, near-field communication, cellular modem, Wi-Fi chips. They've all gotten hit with some pretty basic exploits, in the grand scheme of things. This one's been in the news a lot lately, power cables. at Black Hat and DEF CON last year in the US, the NSA, which is our national security agency, they had a booth and they had a charging station, and it was like, haha, yeah, right. Because certainly the power cables, you may have seen them in the airport. It's like, give us, £2, or I don't know what a quid is, but I assume it's like $1, right? So give us a couple bucks and you can charge your stuff here with our power cables. The power cables can be malicious. They can attack the device, steal data off of them, put their own malware on there embedded. You can also, before the Mac totally screwed up and made it so that they have nothing but their own port on here, I would always plug in my phone to the computer. The computer that's compromised can attack the phone via the cable. A phone that's compromised can attack the computer. This has happened this isn't classified anymore, so I can talk about it, but air-gapped networks, so no access to the internet. And with the US government, one of the employees thought it would be a great idea to, charge his phone off one of them, and that did introduce malware, and this was several years ago. We mentioned cellular, we mentioned, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. SIM cards have had vulnerabilities in them. There's been some really great research there because they actually will execute Java code, near-field communication tags, GPS, certainly in terms of where people are, if you are so interested in that information is available. So these things are sending out a lot of data, and there are all ways that we can potentially attack. And that's a little bit scary. With our traditional devices, I guess my computer speaks Bluetooth, it speaks Wi-Fi. If I had the right, contraption, I could hook it up to a wired network, but that's about it. I'm not really relying on the cellular infrastructure of wherever I am. As we saw in the US, the cellular infrastructure has had a little extra code from the National Security Agency on there, stealing all our stuff for a long time. It's kind of just how it goes. A lot of countries do that. You show up in China, the first thing that happens is all your apps say, time to update, and we've been taught we should definitely update our apps, but these are special updates. So along with the devices, we think, okay, we've got this device, we don't necessarily know too much about it, the user brought it into the network, but the device comes with all this other stuff. And this be, mobile or IoT, they're connected to the internet. They have systems out there in the cloud that they talk to for, security updates of the firmware, backup and storage. We saw several years ago, a lot of the celebrities got hit through, iCloud password resets, push notifications. We've got, the application servers and their updates, file shares, emails, SMS, there's all a bunch of boxes out there. And again, same with when we're talking about software as a service, this is somebody else's problem. If there's a malicious insider that says, well, I want to push out a malicious update to, all of the iPhones through the service provider on this box, the phones will accept them because they are signed by the right key and they came from the right box. And what if they forget to patch? What if we have an Apache Struts incident on, say, the application server for Android? Yeah, maybe not so good. Password problems, all the same vulnerabilities. Again, these are just boxes out there, and they're boxes that we have no control over their security, which makes it a little bit scary. So you think it's just one device with some problems, but they come with all this other stuff. So I mentioned we would talk about social engineering a bit more, though I kind of, told the main point. Naturally, we have email on our mobiles. We have text message. QR codes are a lot of fun, right? Because it's what does that go to? Actually, one of my clients, this is a reference client, so I can talk about it. What we did was they were in a building in Washington, D.C., where I live. They were up at the top. Down at the bottom, there was, a takeaway restaurant, where naturally a lot of people that work there would go for lunch. So we took a QR code that went to our servers, and we put it on a little poster that said, download the application for Restaurant X, and next time you come down, we'll give you a big discount. And when they would indeed scan this, it would give them, Restaurant X application. The actual real one, we just downloaded it, ripped it apart, put some, extra little malware in it, put it back together. Not harmful malware, just prove that we can malware because we're the good guys trying to help them secure their stuff. And naturally, people were scanning it. They got the application they expected. It worked the way they expected. Naturally, when they went downstairs, they had no idea what they were talking about. But by that point, we had control of their devices. So QR codes are fun. Near field communication tags the same way. It's like, do you want to open this link? Absolutely. Things like WhatsApp or Twitter or Snapchat or any way that you can embed a link and get people to click on them are great. Especially stuff like WhatsApp where it's like people are like, well, it's secure. So I can kind of let my guard down from a security perspective on it because it's secure. It'll take care of me. That security awareness kind of goes down a little bit. But traditionally what I see is people's security awareness training is almost entirely email-based. Occasionally you get people doing a little bit with text messages, but they're really not getting the message that the real problem is the link, not the email. So any way you can send it to them, the bad guys are doing it. They've been doing it for a while now. So we definitely need to improve our security awareness programs to keep up with what the bad guys are doing around social engineering. And then the next thing people always ask me are, well, are there really vulnerabilities for mobile devices? Like, I hear they're so secure and stuff. They have that secure enclave and, who cares? They're really hard to exploit. Well, somebody actually sent me this for another presentation we're doing. This is like by year, like the number of vulnerabilities that have come out for the different devices. It really just depends in terms of like, which ones are exploitable and how much impact they had. But the general takeaway is the same as, Windows machines have actually gotten a lot better. They've got, the latest exploit mitigation. They're doing a good job. Mac as well. Pretty much any of the major players are taking their security seriously, and yet vulnerabilities continue to come out. Exploits continue to be released. Malware campaigns continue to take over the universe. Mobile is no different. We're seeing more and more of them. It is growing. Just recently we saw like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, got hit through mobile, and Facebook is currently suing the same people who did that NSO group over attacks through WhatsApp that they did. So this is happening. Like the famous bank robber Willie Sutton said, we go where the money is. That's why we rob the banks. So as mobile and IoT are replacing more of the traditional devices, we're going to see more and more of this. And, a lot of people will also say, like, well, things are encrypted. Things are, even if you get on a device at, like, application level, much like I said about the antivirus, you can't see what's going on in the other applications, right? They've got their stuff, like, in the keychain, or they're encrypted, like, in the secret storage of that application. So everything's dandy. Just because you get a malicious something on my device doesn't mean we really have a problem. But I'm sure all of you have heard of like jailbreaking or rooting, right? People jailbreak their devices or they root their devices so they have more control over them. But in order to do that, in most cases, some of the Androids you can just say, hey, I want to install my own stuff because Google's kind of open like that. But especially on the iPhone, they're like, don't do that. They make it as hard as possible. So what the jailbreaks and roots are doing, they're doing exploitation, the same thing as a bad guy might do. So they're getting like kernel level access to the device, at which point they can see all of the memory of the device. They can see anything that's going on in any of these app sandboxes. They can get access to the keychain. Basically at that point, it's game over for anything you have stored on the device or that shows up in the memory of your application. And a lot of the jailbreaks are public. A proof of concept code, or you can reverse engineer what they put out. And you just tweak it a little bit, take out the payload. Typically on iOS, for example, we put Cydia, the third-party app store, on there. On Android, we put the super user, so we can become root. Take that out, we don't need that. But instead, put a payload that says, grab the keychain, or look at what's going on in one of these security apps, or otherwise just mess with everything. This does happen. Again, a lot of the code is public. You don't have to be super smart. Basically, you can Google your way through it. Like, what does this line of code mean? So, this isn't like nation state level stuff. We see a lot of nation-state level people using it, but it's definitely not just nation-state level people. It doesn't require that much work. You don't have to do a 0-day even. So then the next thing people say to me is, okay, who cares? Particularly on the IoT side. They're like, okay, so I have an internet-connected coffee pot, but I don't store sensitive data on it. There is no corporate credit card data based on the coffee pot, and they are correct about that, I would assume, in absolutely every instance. But it does sit on the same network, perhaps. If it's at home, you probably take your phone and your laptop home and put them on the same network as the coffee pot. If it's at work, who knows what else is on the same network, perhaps that credit card database we're talking about, if they don't have very good network segmentation. So there's this thing called pivoting. So I get somebody's phone or their IoT device, every network it attaches to, I can start looking around to see what else is out there. Maybe they have some security vulnerabilities on their network, bad passwords, missing patches. At the very least, I can, packet capture on the network and see if I can see any like encrypted passwords that I might be able to crack with a password cracker. And so that's where your security of the coffee pot really comes in, because it is likely on the network with things that do have sensitive information and may have vulnerabilities. So yes, your coffee pot getting hit doesn't really matter in and of itself, but it may be a good jumping off point to get to things that do matter. Certainly we can steal data off devices. Coffee pot probably doesn't have any, but our mobile devices certainly do if we're using them at work. Emails, credentials, text message, location information. This is some examples. Control the device, like we can send emails or post on Twitter on people's behalf. Recording video or audio, that's always fun. People are really scared of that. At the nation state level, like, let's not say Trump. Everybody always goes after Trump. But somebody in Trump's cabinet, they're having a super secret meeting about who they're going to bomb this week. And, if there is an attacker from another like nation state who is on one of those devices, the device is on the person, and they are recording audio or video, they may get access to that information. Or, if you're a company and you're talking about like, stock type stuff about, what you're going to do, people can dump your stock if things are about to go bad. Technically it's insider trading, but they're hacking people's devices anyway, so I don't think like doing bad things matters to them. So yeah, definitely, even if it's a coffee pot that does like nothing in terms of like corporate data or anything, it still could lead to a bigger problem. So hopefully I've convinced you that this mobile and IoT thing is a problem. And when there are problems, we have solutions. If you guys have ever been to a big security conference like RSA or Black Hat or any of those and gone around the vendor area, you will see that there are many solutions for every problem you may or may not have in your organization. It is actually kind of scary, these big gigantic booths people make. So in terms of what's out there that we can do to solve these massive problems, this is another one of these kind of like overview slides. I'd rather just talk about the actual stuff. So system isolation. Back when we had Blackberries, this was kind of what people did. You had your corporate Blackberry, and then you had, your Nokia thing that you could play Snake on. Occasionally people still do this, like US government type companies will, issue their own like iPhone with all like the communications ripped out, and then you'll have your own device that you can't bring to work with you. So they kind of solve the problem that way. One, this is expensive. You have to issue devices to people, and then suddenly it is your problem again to keep them up to date and whatnot, as IT or security. So most people don't do that. Dual profile devices, in the extreme case, you'll see like CPU and RAM and everything, like two different ones, two different hardware in one device. One, these tend to get very big very quickly, and two, they tend to get very hot very quickly. There have been instances of this where the devices have literally exploded. A more not as wild case of this would be like the secure enclave on iOS and Android, where it's got its own little CPU and RAM, but it's just for for that crypto stuff with the cards, not all your work stuff in a completely separate device in one. Or something like Samsung Knox is another example, something like that. That's what a lot of people are doing. But also, I guess kind of the gold standard right now is application isolation. If you're at your work have enterprise mobility management or anything, you probably have something like this where you'll have like your personal email app and your work email app and your PDF viewer for work and your PDF viewer for personal. They're on the same device, but theoretically they're sandboxed so that anything that's outside of the work sandbox, which is an additional sandbox in addition to the one that's already built in for each app, will not be able to see any of the data that is inside your work one. Naturally, if you think back a few slides to this where you're beneath all the applications, you might be able to see where this might go wrong. All right, so then there was this mobile device management, and I'm traditionally, though I say I'm a terrible coder, my code works, it's just not beautiful. I'm a hacker by trade. I break stuff, I do pen tests, I do security research. Occasionally I write books. I learned a little bit about business. I went to a business like startup accelerator to do a product startup, and I learned a ton about business. And mobile device management is a beautiful example of a business case because we had BlackBerry, right? BlackBerry was around and then suddenly it disappeared. The BlackBerry is still around and they actually own mobile device managements now. They own Good, they bought them, so they're actually in this business now, which I think is kind of interesting. But anyway, people had BlackBerry enterprise servers or BES, and it didn't do anything. Nobody was thinking about security of phones in the BlackBerry days. But what it did allow people to do is, one, inventory, know what BlackBerries we have, and all the way back at the beginning with the blue boxes I was talking about on my pen test today of networks, I often find boxes that people forgot about and are outside of the security program. So we certainly haven't solved inventory problems. So it was great to have something that did inventory of what are the mobile devices that are connecting to my network. Certainly still a problem we have. So it did that, and additionally, it did getting their devices set up, enrollment. So instead of like somebody who's probably not technical in a lot of cases having to do a lot of setup, or IT having to manually type in everybody's stuff to get them hooked up to like email and whatnot on their BlackBerry, they just had mobile device management that would make this all very simple. Great thing to have. Well, when BlackBerry went away and nobody had them anymore, and iPhone, and then later once they got their act together a little bit more, Android started to come into the enterprise a lot. We needed that sort of stuff. People still needed to get their email and whatnot, and they didn't want to have to do it themselves or take it to IT one by one. And we needed to know what devices were on our network, especially as bring your own device began. So people had a line item in their budget for BlackBerry BES, and as I learned in business, having a line item that's already there is a great way to make sales easy. That's about all I know about business is right there in that little capsule. So people naturally who are more business savvy than me realized there was a gap in the market. There was already a line item for it, and mobile device management arrived. Mobile device management said on the back of the box that we do security, but they didn't really, and they were typically bought by operations and not security. So they didn't really provide us any security value. But when people ask, what are you doing about mobile device security and bring your own device? People say, oh, we have mobile device management. People would check the box and life would go on, much as it always does in security. But then we basically did the same thing, but named it Enterprise Mobility Management. People kind of realized through enough security research that this wasn't providing us anything in the way of security. So really they renamed themselves Enterprise Mobility Management and added some security features. This is where you'll see a lot of the stuff that they have, the devices do themselves now, like remote wipe and requiring a certain length of password and whatnot, giving you access to the corporate VPN and setting up your email and whatnot, checking, are you up to date? It does do some of that. It doesn't do anything in terms of protecting you from social engineering attacks. You might have a corporate app store as part of it, blacklisting and whitelisting apps, kind of a disaster, but you might have like a corporate SDK that you can wrap your apps in, those ones that go in the application sandbox for work. It'll have your like servers for your SharePoint and whatnot in it. And these are all like different parts you can buy. Like you can buy one piece or you can buy all of it. But this, it does provide some security, but certainly not enough to deal with the problem. Like, they all say on the back of the box, this will protect you against all zero-day attacks, including against nation states. I hate to rag on preventative solutions because there's a lot of value in preventative solutions. But like who wins the preventative solution war is almost entirely based on, how good their marketing is. And a lot of times they lie. Like they all say, I swear, we can stop all attacks against everything. I mean, this happens in the traditional computing world too. Like install this intrusion detection, data loss prevention, next-gen firewalls, blinky light thing. And you don't have to worry about security anymore. Patching? Password management? Social engineering? Oh, we take care of all that. Oh, no, you don't have to have somebody to like tune it and like watch the logs or anything. It'll just do it. And yeah, that's not what happens. Equifax is what happens when that is what people take. But the sales guys are telling them this is what will work. And if you're not like a security researcher, how would you know? If I was a CISO or a CEO or whatever, and I came around, in my silly shirt, and I said, well, I can like test all your stuff, find your vulnerabilities, help you fix as much as possible, and help you limit the impact of the rest of them. And somebody in a nice suit and tie came in and said, if you install this, you never have to think about security again. I would buy that if I wasn't me, So you can't blame anybody except, the security industry for our problems. But, most people have one of these right now. Some people, just have a standalone mobile application management. This is kind of like what they tell you to buy right now, where you can blacklist and whitelist your applications. Since you guys are developers, I'm sure you're all too familiar with blacklisting and whitelisting and hate it just as much as I do. Blacklisting being you can't use these certain apps. All the other ones are fine. Whitelisting, you can only use these certain apps. If you want to use anything else, no, you may not. It doesn't really work out really well on either side. Some of them do have like an SDK wrapper for applications, so you can, theoretically make them a little more secure. But again, this kind of falls into the problem of, yes, we have like our own little sandbox, but if somebody is able to get root level, kernel level access to our device, all that sandbox is useless anyway. So do all of these provide value? Absolutely. Do they provide a silver bullet? Absolutely not. I'm not saying don't buy them. Do buy them if you have the budget. But certainly don't treat them as a security like silver bullet. And like do take the time to like read the logs and tune them to your particular needs. And that brings us back full circle basically to endpoint protection. I started with the antivirus story. That antivirus did a really good job at this one little thing it did, but it was completely useless on mobile. But in the time since then, they have opened up, both Apple and Android have opened up security APIs specifically for these devices, which is actually a really good additional like phishing opportunity. Like if people are used to saying like, yes, install the security certificate to make our enterprise mobility management, our endpoint protection, like management on our device, well, why not install like malware.com as an administrator too, and then it can see all of those. So, you win some, you lose some, I suppose. But we actually, in, I guess probably just the last year even, have started to see some really good movement in the endpoint protection space. I guess, people are starting to realize like, this is just not enough. We need endpoint protection that actually does better than just waking up and seeing whether it's a virus. So, like as an example, pretty much everybody says, we can detect jailbreaks. It's on the back of the box. I know there aren't really boxes, but bear with me. They say it on the website then, that we can detect jailbreaks. Well, traditionally when I look at these, like on iOS, they will specifically be looking for the Cydia app, the third-party app store. And indeed, most of the time when someone, downloads a jailbreak off the internet to jailbreak their own device so they can have fancy wallpaper or whatever it is people do with it, and install third-party apps that aren't in the Apple Store, don't do that. Because though the Apple Store and the Android Store are certainly not perfect, they're certainly better than like, weird-ass appstore.com out in the cloud somewhere. But anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, yes. So they're looking for Cydia, and if they don't see Cydia, device isn't jailbroken. If you're an attacker and you just want to get, back to this, embed yourself at root level and steal data, you don't need a third-party app store. You just rip that part of the payload out and put in like, hey, steal the keychain. Same thing, in the Android side, it can be even worse. Like, they'll be looking for like the SU, and you can change it to like SU1, and they won't see it. Like, really pathetic in terms of like trying to find things. But I've just now, like in the last year to 18 months, started to see like some of these people. There's a new category. Categories are great. They have these things like Gartner. Gartner must hate me because of all bad things I say about them on stage. But basically, I don't know. You guys have Gartner here? Where it's like there's a magic quadrant, right? And you have to pay to be on the magic quadrant at all. But if you're in, let me see, I have to do it this way. So if you're in the bottom left, you suck. If you're in the top right, you're really awesome. But you pay a lot more money to be in the top right. But most people, they're like, well, we need analysts to tell us what to buy. Let's buy what's in the top right. So again, marketing budget wins the day. If anyone wants to contribute to my marketing budget, I will take donations. I'm kidding. I'm not actually, well, I'm not really, but you know what I mean. So anyway, but where was I going with this again? Anyway, so I have started to see some where, like for instance, when looking for the jailbreak, they'll check to see whether like the main partition is mounted read-write, which is something that most of the time with jailbreaks is necessary to get that kernel level. So they're actually going to be able to detect attacks. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. But it's certainly moving in the right direction. So mobile threat defense, that's the Gartner category. In terms of what's where and whatnot, I would take it with a grain of salt, more like Google mobile threat defense and see what you can find in terms of like, bake-offs that people have put out there. But, this is finally, I've ragged on endpoint protection for so long, but, now that I've been doing a lot of bake-offs, it's actually a lot of what I do is do bake-offs of like what products different company needs, and I'm actually seeing some good stuff here. So look into that mobile threat defense. Question? Oh, so a bake-off is like, so say we want to buy a mobile threat defense, but we're not sure which one is going to be the best for us. So we get some and we try them against their network and see what fits best with them. I hate conclusion slides too. So mobile threats revisited, basically it's a disaster. We have malware, we have social engineering, we have unauthorized access, we have all these different ways that they communicate, all the stuff that we talked about. But, we still have these in the traditional computing world. So, it's kind of just the same as everything else. But what's missing? In the traditional computing world, we do, well, not everybody, but a lot of people. If you have a pretty like up-to-date security program, you're at the very least like buying a vulnerability scanner and scanning for vulnerabilities on your internal network or your web application or what have you. If you're a step further than that, you're doing penetration testing and having people like me, or if you're really big, you have your own team, pretend to be the attacker, find the vulnerabilities, fix them where possible. If it's not possible to fix it, like social engineering, you're never really going to fix that completely. But, we're training the users as much as possible and mitigating the impact. Like if somebody's workstation gets hit by a social engineering attack, if they're not admin on their own machine or the desktops are isolated on their own VLAN away from like the credit card databases, that would limit the impact comparatively to like a flat network. You have admin access and it's like, oh, credit cards. But we don't have this on mobile, hardly at all. Well, I do it, but hardly anybody buys it from me. So we never have done risk management around mobile. A lot of why I have to do the bake-offs, people are right, can't you just tell me which one's the best? But I have not found like anybody really who has like the same bring your own device policy or mobile and IoT policy as the next person. Like not even in the same industry. Like, finance is generally, ahead of the curve. They're looking at, the latest and greatest in terms of security. Again, that's where the money is, so people rob banks. But even in their, the different policies that they have, is the mobility like on their own VLAN, or are they in with everybody else? Do we allow only specific devices? Are we checking, what version of the operating system and the apps that they have? It's all over the place, like what will work for you. This is true of anything though, one size fits all data loss prevention, it doesn't exist either, but at least we kind of have an idea of like what generally speaking people need. We never really did that with mobile. To go back to the beginning, we said, okay, we make security products, let's put the word mobile in front of it, let's make more money. And in some cases, that worked out all right. In other cases, it never worked out all right. And in some cases, it's finally coming to fruition now. So we absolutely need to be doing a baseline of risk management. What exactly is your risk in your organization of that coffee pot? Are you right that having the internet connected coffee pot on your corporate network doesn't actually have a problem? Or does it have a default password in it? And does it talk like Bluetooth to somebody like literally outside the window could hit it and it has a Bluetooth vulnerability, or I can log into it with the default credentials and then it can get to the corporate database? Very bad. If it's all by itself and it's all up to date and it doesn't have any of those vulnerabilities, yeah, just fine. But who knows? We're not doing any of the testing. On my pen testing, they seriously say none of that stuff is in scope. Forget about it. Oh, those are people's own devices. We can't test those. It's called terms of use, guys. You put it on our network, we're going to test it because we have to keep our users safe. So we need to do monitoring of the mobility. We need to get it into our security program. We cannot just continue to be like, oh, let's put this box in front of it. Everything is okay. This has never worked in the past. It's certainly not going to work in like the most complex system we've ever created. I mean, we think we have problems with desktops and workstations. These things are a disaster. We need to be doing the penetration test. I see people doing, if somebody builds a mobile application, they might do security testing, penetration testing against it. But in terms of like your mobile infrastructure, all the mobile devices, all the IoT devices, all the preventative products you've bought or thinking about buying if you're doing a bake-off, are they actually providing you any value? Like if it says on the back of the box it can do X, X, and X, try to do X, X, and X like an attacker and see if it actually catches any of it. You might be surprised a lot of them do not. So naturally we need a baseline, but we need to rinse and repeat. And this is true of any network. People do it like once a year. Let's be honest, a lot of people do it like somebody they're working with says, you have to have a pen test. They get a pen test. They never read the report. They check the box. People who are doing it better do it yearly. People who are doing it even better do it quarterly. People who are doing it even better have their own team and are continuously doing testing. But we absolutely need to be doing that for our mobility and IoT because it changes so much. I mean, laptops, desktops, servers, and networking equipment, sure, things get decommissioned and whatnot, or somebody loses the laptop and they get another one, or it breaks. But with the mobile devices and the IoT, every time a light bulb burns out, people are like, should we get those Philip Hue things? Those are cool. And then, somebody drops their phone in the toilet or a new version comes out, and certainly your risk profile has changed completely around your mobile and IoT in the course of just a week. So we need to be testing this stuff, and we need to keep testing it because it's not going to stay the same. This is definitely not a sales pitch. This is free and for security researchers. So like if you're building your own phones or you just want to test your own phone or you want to do security research and find vulnerabilities, I do have a free tool you guys can use. It looks like a product because it has a kind of crappy front end on it. You guys being developers are probably like, that's the worst front end I've ever seen. But yeah, I told you I'm not a great coder. But yeah, you can run different social engineering tests, client sides, do known jailbreaks, simulate malware. All the things I talked about that we should be testing. You can do this against your own device. There are paid versions, but those are for people who are enterprises. If you're building your own stuff or just want to do research, free version works fine for you. So like you can simulate malware. You know, I mentioned like jailbreaking, so it can like jailbreak the device if it's vulnerable to a known jailbreak. And then, you know, there's the iOS keychain, so steal all that. That's always fun. So this would actually say 11 because, you know, the year just changed. But so, you know, the question we're left with is 11 years into mobility. So that's when, since iOS or iPhone 1 came out, has security caught up? I mean, my answer is no, but we are, I think, for the first time in a long time, really making strides towards making it true that we have, but I think we have a lot of work to do. I know a lot of you guys do not work in the mobile space, but you know, if you're interested in being a security researcher, it's not a particularly hard thing to do. And you know, if you're building code, certainly think in terms of secure development. But if you're building mobile applications, what you really need to think about is do not trust the platform you're on at all. I know the platforms, iOS, Android, like to tell you everything is fine. Whatever you do, we have all the sandboxing and stuff. And indeed, they do a good job. But you know, as we saw with like jailbreaking and getting into the kernel, you can't trust the platform at all. You certainly can't trust the user to make good decisions. So if you're doing anything with mobile development, don't trust the platform. And you know, that's about all I have to say for today, which it looks like I have been talking for 54 minutes. I don't even know how long I was supposed to talk, but thank you guys for coming out on a Friday morning to see me talk. Does anyone have any questions? Question right here.
So, like cars and older IoT devices are still prevalent on networks today, but of course, like security techniques have moved on. Would you say there's a hard limit on an age for an IoT device?
Hard limit on an age for an IoT device? No, I mean, you still see devices coming out today that don't think about security at all, and then there are ones that have been for a long time and are still doing, you know, automatic firmware updates and make you change the password. I wouldn't say that there's like a hard limit on like how new it has to be. You know, it really just depends on the vendor. You know, are they doing? I mean, the main things I would look at is, do they have default passwords in them? Do they make you change it when you're setting it up? Do they at least allow you to change it? Are they doing firmware updates? Are they doing it automatically, or at least making it easy for you to get it? You know, those are the main two. If they're doing that, they're at least thinking security. If they're not doing that, they're not thinking security, and we shouldn't trust them. Anything else? Right here.
On the what we do sort of slide, you have baseline current risk.
Uh-huh.
Do you just mean like understand what you currently have?
Yes, yeah, understand what we currently have. That's, nobody that I've ever worked with can tell me exactly what, like, we have this many of this and this many of that, and these ones aren't updated here and they're vulnerable to this, and yeah, just knowing that would be a lot in the right direction. Which, like I said, we still have this problem in traditional devices. There's often that strange thing in the corner that's not getting updated. This isn't a new problem, it's just a problem we're not addressing, and it's getting worse. Anything else? All right, well, thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate having some audience. I know this being a developer conference, this isn't you guys' usual thing, but I hope you learned a thing or two. I'm notorious for forgetting to bring business cards, but this is, you know, my contact info. I'm also like the only Georgia Weidman on the internet as far as I can tell. If you guys have any questions, or you know, decide you want to be security researchers because my talk inspired you so much, I'd love to hear from you. You know, Twitter and email are generally the easiest way. If I don't respond to you, write me again, because sometimes I suck at responding. But yeah, thank you guys. I'll let you guys go on to the next session, which will probably be about development. All right, thanks.